Welcome this weekend as we are in our second week of our series called Love. I mean, can you believe it's called Love? It is February, right? Guys, quick hint. If you're in a relationship, Valentine's Day is 5 days away, okay? You have 5 shopping days left. So, Chad started us off last week as we're in this love series talking about loving my God. What does that look like? What does it mean to have a God that loves us? And such a powerful message. If you missed that, go check it out on the website, listen to that. And what we want you to understand is that we were created for relationship. We were created first for a relationship with God. And that relationship can only be found through His Son, Jesus Christ. If you have questions about that today, maybe you've heard that before, I would encourage you, stop one of us, ask us after the church. We'd love to talk to you about what that looks like and what that means. But secondly, we were created to have relationships with one another. We were not created to do life alone. And I want to start off by reading Genesis chapter 2, verse 20b. And some of this you've probably heard before. But in 20b, it starts off this way. It says, "But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. The man said, 'This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh.'" And so as you read through the scriptures, one of the things that you're going to find, or you're going to see, that marriage is one of the types of relationships outside of our relationship with God that is talked about the most. And that's what we're talking about this today. And I know some of you are here probably going, okay, I'm single. I don't plan on ever being married again. This message probably is me. I would encourage you, hang on. There's going to be some stuff in here for you as well. Maybe not for you personally, but maybe for you to pass on to somebody you know. Maybe a sibling, maybe a child, maybe a friend of a family that comes to you and has some struggles or some questions about this. So today, as we talk about this, loving my spouse and what that looks like, as you can see, we're going to do something a little different today. We want to share both from a male perspective, but also a female perspective today. So let's begin by having us introduce ourselves.
I am Lindsay. I am the women's and groups pastor here at Refinery. I am not married to Aaron, and he is not my dad either. He's a little older than I am.
Hey.
Yep. I am married to Tim. We have been married for almost 13 years in April. We met in a church small group, so just saying. And we have one son. His name is Alex. He's 10 years old, and he keeps us very busy. I have a set of parents. They have been married for 44 years. I grew up in a home where my parents loved each other. I can remember maybe 1 or 2 fights, and then they apologized to us afterwards that we even saw that. They just love each other and they respect each other.
I'm Aaron. I am married to my high school sweetheart. Yes, that is me, with hair. Okay? Married to my high school sweetheart. We have been married for 33 years and 11 months. So, and as you can see, we have quite the crew. We have 3 adult children who are all married. If you count in this picture, you're going to count 7 grandsons. We actually have 8 grandsons. We have a new one that is about almost 5 months old. And we just found out this week that we are expecting grandchild number 9. So we're fingers crossed it's a girl. All right? So keep us in your prayers. Like Lindsay, I'm very fortunate. And I didn't realize how fortunate it was in the time when I was growing up. I just took my family for granted. My family is a fairly large family. My dad is the next to the youngest of 9. My mom is the second oldest of 4. And so you count that up, I had 11 sets of aunts and uncles that I got to watch growing up. Out of that 11 sets of aunts and uncles, I saw 1 divorce. 1 divorce. And I didn't know what an anomaly that was. My parents are still married. They will be celebrating their 54th wedding anniversary later this summer. But I've experienced the other side as well, because my wife's family put the fun in dysfunctional. Out of her handfuls of aunts and uncles, there are probably she's got a total of three aunts and uncles combined out of marriage. Some were sons, some were daughters. And out of that, including her parents' divorce, there's about 11 divorces. Just in the aunts and uncles. That didn't include their kids. So I've seen the other side of it as well. And so I want to share with you first. I know it's always fun when we start with the negative, right? I used to teach planning and problem solving. One of the things I used to always do with my students is if you have a really bad problem, think of all the ways you can make it worse. And usually once you figure out how you can make it worse, you can flip that around and figure out how to make it better. So I want to start with ways to destroy your marriage. And Proverbs 5, 3 through 5. Yeah, I know, great tips, right? But it's honestly, I think it's important because sometimes you get involved and you start doing some of these things and you don't even realize that you might be on a path that's going to destroy your marriage. Proverbs 5, 3 through 5 said, "For the lips of an adulteress drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil, but in the end she is bitter as gall, sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, and her steps lead straight to the grave." First, you want to destroy your marriage? Neglect your marriage. Neglect your marriage, and there's a variety of ways you can do that. You can neglect your marriage by spending more time with somebody of the opposite sex, either in an emotional connection or maybe even a physical connection, where you spend a lot of time with them will begin to destroy your marriage. There's also pornography. It doesn't have to be a physical person that you're around all the time. It can be pornography. That's one of the biggest issues in our culture today. A lot of people think, oh, it's very innocent and it really doesn't mean anything. But pornography can and will destroy your marriage. I've seen it over and over. I've had those people in my office talking to me about those things. There's some other things that will cause us to neglect our marriage. They're maybe not as negative or, they don't seem as negative, but they can get negative. Hobbies. Sometimes we allow our hobbies to dominate our lives, and they overtake who we are. Our technology, phones and computers. You think about it, you go to a restaurant, and how many couples do you see sitting and having dinner together, and they're both staring at their phones? And if their kids are there, their kids have iPads sitting at the table. There's no interaction at the table at all. Second way to destroy your marriage, flirt. And I'm not talking about don't flirt with your spouse. What I'm talking about is don't flirt with other people. And I know some of you are probably going, wait a minute, you don't understand, that's just my personality. That's just how I come across. And it might seem innocent to you, but a lot of relationships begin with innocent flirting. And I can guarantee you, I don't care what your spouse has told you. If your spouse tells you they don't care, they're lying because they don't want to hurt you or they don't want to have that conversation. I can guarantee you, if you flirt all the time in front of your spouse, it bothers them, even if it's just a little bit. It bothers them. And the longer it goes on, the more it's going to bother them. And thirdly, make excuses. Make excuses when you're wrong. Make excuses for your actions. Put it on somebody else. That's one of the things that I've seen in my wife's family and a number of those divorces, as those marriages were deteriorating before they ever got to divorce, as I saw people that continually put everything bad always revolved around somebody else. It wasn't my fault. I did that because they did this. Or I responded that way because they did this to me. They never owned their own stuff. So don't make excuses. Proverbs 5, 8 through 10 says, "Keep on a path far from her. Do not go near the door of her house, lest you give your best strength to others and your years to one who is cruel. Lest strangers feast on your wealth and your toil enrich another man's house." Or the house of another man. When we read that passage, what you will understand is when you begin walking down this path, it doesn't end well. When you walk down this path, it doesn't end well. Not only does the other person in the relationship get hurt, other family members are hurt, and I will tell you this, even adult children are hurt by parents when they get divorced as their children are adults. Their children can already be married, have their own families, and if a mom and dad get divorced, it affects that whole family. It's not just about you or that other person. It affects everybody.
So we want to dig into some ways to reduce your risks. In Proverbs 5, verses 15 through 19, it says, "Drink from your own cistern, running water from your own well. Should your springs overflow in the streets, your streams of water in the public squares? Let them be yours alone, never to be shared with strangers. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. A loving doe, a graceful deer, may her breast satisfy you always. May you ever be captivated by her love." We need to be captivated by our spouse. We need to turn to our spouse and go to them, not looking for ways outside of our marriage to be fulfilled. So we have a couple different ways that you can reduce your risks. The first, keep your eyes on Jesus. It's very easy to keep your eyes on Jesus when you're reading God's word, when you know what God's word says, when you're praying, when you have accountability, when you have people in your life around you that believe in Jesus and they're going to point you to that. The world is going to tell us so many things, and if we're not paying attention to what Jesus says, we're going to turn to what the world says. We're going to accept what the world says is truth instead of what God says is truth. The second, don't be alone with the wrong people. Here on staff, we have a rule that we're not allowed to be alone with someone of the opposite sex. That means we can't drive to a meeting one-on-one together. We can't go to lunch together. We just don't do it. Most affairs start very innocently, just spending time together, and then you start enjoying that time, and it builds, and you find yourself wanting to spend more time and things like that. We're not even going to put ourselves in that situation. Not to mention, we love our spouses, and we don't even want our spouses to ever answer the question, why was Lindsay alone with that person? Why were they going somewhere? I can remember a time when Kenny and I were both going to a meeting. We were the only ones on staff going to this meeting. It was 40 minutes away, and we drove separate. We're not even going to put ourselves in those situations. And we hit rush hour traffic on the way back, and it would have been so much easier and more convenient for us to drive together, but we're not going to go there. We're not going to cross those guardrails. We have them in place to protect us, and the more you push and push and push, it leads to disaster.
Yeah, and like she said, it's not always easy. Sometimes putting those things in place in your life can cause difficulties, can cause you to have to take the long way to get to where you're going. And not only do we do that as a staff, I talk to even my kids, people that aren't on staff with us, just about the value of having those guardrails in place. Protect yourself, because you never know where things might end up.
Yeah, very true. I also would encourage you, limit your amount of time with people that don't value marriage. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, "Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character." If you surround yourselves with people that don't believe in marriage, that they don't believe that it's wrong to have affairs, to step out in your marriage, to watch pornography, things like this, you're going to be, if that's who you spend the majority of your time with, that's going to become normal for you, and you're going to start pushing your boundaries and pushing those guardrails. So watch the people that you're around. Protect your marriage in that way. Number 3, never talk badly about your marriage with the wrong people. Marriage is hard, and there are times in marriage where we need to be able to go to someone and we need to be able to ask questions and get wisdom, but choose cautiously who those people are that are allowed to speak into your marriage. Again, I would encourage you, someone of the same sex. Again, emotional affairs start very innocently enough. As a woman, you go to a man and you're telling him your issues, and they are sympathizing with you. They're listening to you. They're telling you things like, I would never do that. And these emotional affairs just build. The woman starts thinking, well, why is my husband not like that? The same can go with the man talking to a woman. So someone of the same sex. I would also encourage someone that loves Jesus, someone that's married, that loves your spouse. Early on in my marriage, I had a mentor tell me, never talk to someone about your marriage that doesn't love both of you. Because what happens is when we go to someone, say they don't love our spouse, they are not a fan of our spouse, they're always going to side with us. You're not going to get wise counsel in that regard. Plus, you're probably going to jade their idea of who your spouse is. Don't go to family. You don't want your family being jaded by your frustrations of your spouse. We all have frustrations with our spouse at times. Leave your family out of that. Go to someone that's going to love both of you and speak truth into both of you.
Yeah, and I would say, that's one of the things when I do premarital counseling, I talk to people all the time about Don't bash your spouse to your family all the time. Don't bash your spouse to your parents, because they're going to side with you. Like she said, they're going to side with you every single time, and they're going to begin to form a bad opinion of who they are. I've seen this happen in my wife's family in particular, where one of the children, every single time they would have any little fight, he would immediately pick up the phone and call mom and dad and say, "You're never going to believe what she just did." And by the time it got near the end, they absolutely hated her, and the parents were constantly bad-mouthing her to the rest of the family.
Yeah, don't go there. Ephesians 4:29 says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, then it may benefit those who listen." I want, when Tim hears that I said something about him, that it will be positive. I don't even have to worry about what I said, because it's going to build him up when it gets back to him. I don't want him hearing that I ran him over, that I railed him, that I put him down with other people. I don't want any of that ever getting back to him. So make sure that what's coming out of your mouth is uplifting to your spouse. Number 4, surround yourselves with strong marriages. Every marriage, no matter how long you've been married, you've gone through highs and lows. Every marriage has had good and bad times. We want to surround ourselves with people that have been through things, that have withstood the test of time, that when we're going through something difficult, we can go to them and we can say, "How did you deal with this situation? How did you deal with having a new baby? How did you deal with your kids leaving? How did you deal with transitions at work? Speak into me, teach me this stuff." Have those marriages in your life that you can go to that have weathered the storm. We're going to ask you to do something. I want everyone to stand up for a minute. Audience participation. You excited? Okay, so now, if you are not married, or you've been married less than 5 years, I want you to sit down. If you've been married less than 10 years, sit down. Oh, I like this. 15. 20. 30. 40. Oh, this is fun. 50. How many years have you guys been married? Sorry? 52. We have a little prize for you.
While she's coming up, I mean, as we talked about this, as Lindsay and I were getting ready for this, we thought about doing this because most of you have been to weddings, right? Where they do that dance, and they say, "Hey, if you've been married less than a day, sit down," and the bride and groom go sit down, and they kind of go through that. One of the coolest things happened to me when our son got married, just a testimony to our family, but also to his new wife's family. My wife and I had been married for almost 30 years. My parents had been married for almost 50 years, and when we all sat down, there were still 10-plus couples standing out there from both sides of the family. And I couldn't help but think, man, what a legacy for these young people that are just starting off to see this longevity of marriage. And it was really cool as well, as we were just talking this week. There's 10 of us that are currently on staff here at the refinery. And together, collectively, we have over 216 years of marriage experience. Isn't that awesome? I mean, it's like cool when I think about that the people that I get to hang out with every day, not just the people I choose to hang out with occasionally, but the people I actually hang out with every single day, have had long marriages and are great examples for me to look to and talk to about these things.
The 5th thing that we want to say is avoid all inappropriate places and situations. If you're going to be tempted, if you know you're walking into a situation that could be bad for you, don't. It seems simple, but it's not. Don't put yourself in situations. If you struggle with pornography, don't get on the computer. Don't get on your phone. Put blocks on your phones. If you're going to work and your coworkers are going out for dinner afterwards, and you know that they don't believe in marriage, and they're just going to bash their spouses or bash marriage, things like that, don't go. If you're attracted to somebody that you work with, avoid them. Like, don't put yourself in those situations. It goes farther than that, though. Women, I would encourage you, be cautious of the movies that you're watching, the books that you're reading, the TV shows. Aaron and I were talking this week, and we were talking about, for women, it's emotional pornography. for women, we don't want our spouses going and looking at pornography, gawking over other women, things like that. But somehow there's this double standard. And it's okay for us to have emotional pornography, if you will, in romance novels or in movies. We get caught up in these expectations, these things that we want for our marriage that are unrealistic and our spouse can never live up to.
And it's just like pornography for men, the physical, the visual idea. You know, what that does for a man is it creates an unrealistic expectation about his wife, and it's the exact same thing. And you talk about romance comedies, and I'm not here to bash Disney, but you think about it, it starts in the very beginning with some of the Disney movies. What happens at the end of every single one? The white prince shows up on the horse, and they lived happily ever after. And it creates this idea in your mind. It creates an image of a man that does not exist.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about ways to destroy your marriage. We've talked about ways to reduce your risks. But we don't want marriages that are just not getting divorced. We don't want marriages that are just surviving. We want marriages that are thriving. We want marriages that you're investing in. And so the rest of our time today, we're just going to dive into ways that we can invest passionately in our marriage. We want to be people that invest in our marriage, that spend time really pouring into each other. And so we have 6 different ways to do that. The first is get transparent. This happens in 2 ways. The first, Tim and I, we're married. He has full access to everything of mine. He has access to my phone. He has access to our bank accounts. We're married. We have joint accounts. He can see all the money that's being spent. Social media accounts, emails, everything. My purse, he can get into it. We have Find My Friends on our phone. Not to stalk each other, but it's helpful so I can see on the way home where he's at. But at any point, I can see where he's at because we're transparent. There's no secrets between us. There's no shadiness. We're open with each other. The other part of this is being open and honest about our feelings and what we're thinking. So often, your spouse knows you better than you do, probably. I tell my husband that all the time. I know you better than you do. Because I know him, I'm around him, I know his highs and his lows. And so he also knows me. So when he asks me how I'm doing and I say, fine, anyone else know that that's not what you mean? Be honest about what you're feeling and what you're thinking. Tell them, share those things with them. Don't let the little things become the big things. So often we don't deal with the stuff when they're small, when it's maybe just a small frustration, like, I don't like it that you throw your clothes on the floor instead of putting them in the hamper. And instead of dealing with this, it becomes this because we've let it fester and we've let it build on each other. And so deal with stuff early on. Ephesians 4:25-27 says, "Therefore each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. In your anger do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold." Deal with things early on. Talk to your spouse about how you're feeling. Talk to your spouse about how it made you feel when this happened or what you were thinking when this happened. Deal with stuff. Be open and honest and transparent with each other.
Secondly, invest passionately in your marriage by spend time getting alone. Get alone. And I know some of you, especially if you have young kids at home, you go, oh, that's easier said than done. Mm-hmm. Figure that out. I would challenge you to figure that out. Date one another. Date one another. Go out to dinner when it's not a McDonald's with the kids, okay? Actually go and sit down at a restaurant. Put your phones away and actually engage in conversation with one another. Find activities that you enjoy doing together outside of the home. That will help you even especially as your kids get a little older and transition out of your home. I mean, ultimately, if you think about it, that was one of the things my wife and I, fortunately, we realized it very early on in our marriage that our kids were only in our home for this specific set period of time. And if we didn't stay focused on our marriage, because we'd seen a lot of couples do that, you've heard of that, the empty nest syndrome, you get to the point where the kids move out and the kids have been the focus of everything, and the husband and wife look at each other and they're like, we don't even know who each other are anymore. We don't have anything in common. And so spend time alone, figure those things out. One of the things that I love doing, I love getting out to the mountains. I have a 4-wheel drive, like getting away. My wife knows that recharges me. And so even this week, I sent her a real quick text. I have 300-pound dogs. So when we leave, we can't leave them at the home by themselves. So we have a lady that watches them, and I texted my wife and I said, can you contact Donna and see if she can watch the dogs Sunday night? And my wife said, for what? And I said, because we're going north. And so tomorrow, right after service, we're jumping in our vehicle, and we're going to head north just to get away because it recharges us. Spend time alone.
We made this decision in our marriage. We get away alone every year. It might be a staycation on the other side of town. It might be a weekend, and it might be a bigger trip. But Tim and I are going to invest in our marriage, and we're going to spend that time, and we're going to carve that out of our budget, and we are going to make that a priority because we want to invest in our marriage. We go do cool things. I've heard so many people that are like, well, I don't want my kid to miss out on that. Tough. Alex misses out on stuff. We go do fun things. He'll get older one day and can go do it himself, and we want to take him on some stuff, but it's okay for us to have fun experiences together and go do things without our kid. So make that a priority. The number 3 is get spiritual. Pray for each other. We go out into a battlefield every single day. I hope your house is not a battlefield, but I know for some it is. But just leaving the house, we go into a battlefield. And so pray for each other and pray with each other. I pray for all areas of Tim's life. I pray for his character. I pray that he will be more like Jesus. I pray for his job. I pray for his commute. He drives a long way every day. I pray for just everything in his life because I want him surrounded in prayer. There are times I wake up in the middle of the night and can't sleep, and I just put my hand on him and I just pray over him because I constantly want to keep him in prayer. Ephesians 6:12 says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the power of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realm." We are walking into a battlefield, and we need to make sure that we are covering our spouse in prayer.
4th, get help. Get help. Proverbs 12:15 says, "The way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice." Reach out, talk with somebody. And I would say do that on the front end. Do it before major difficulties arise. Find somebody in your life, like we mentioned earlier, somebody that's of the same gender as you, that you can have real conversation with about struggles and difficulties that you might be facing in your life. Somebody that can hold you accountable and also be blunt with you, because there are times that you might go to them with a complaint and they're going to tell you, you're blowing that out of proportion, dude. You're wrong. You need to listen to what she's saying in that instance. Talk to someone more seasoned in marriage. You saw across the room a while ago, we have a number of people in here that have been married 20 plus years. Mm-hmm. Find out who some of those people are and begin to do life with them. Go to dinner with them. Hang out with them. And last but not least, if you find yourself in a really difficult situation, seek professional help. You can always let us know as a staff. We would love to be able to help you in this. If you're struggling, come talk to one of us. We are connected to some professional counselors, and if we feel that that's what you need, then we will make that recommendation and help you figure that out. But ask for help. Get help.
Number 5 is get encouraged. We need to encourage our spouse. We need to be each other's biggest cheerleaders. Again, we go out into a tough world. There is evil, there is stress, there is worry, so much stuff in this world. And when our spouse comes home, they need to know that we're going to be there to support them, that we're going to encourage them, that we're going to build them up. I read a Harvard Business Review this week, and it said that for every one negative thing you say to your spouse, you need to respond with 5 positive things. So when I say, hey, you didn't take out the trash last night, I need to then say 5 positive things to counteract that negative. This article went on to say that they can even predict the couples that are going to get divorced because of the negative talk in their marriage. That for every 3 positive comments that they make, and there's 4 negative comments, those couples will get divorced. That they've just shown it. I mean, think about it. Who wants to be surrounded by people all day that are constantly tearing you down, that are telling you all the things that you've done wrong, that you forgot to do, that you didn't do, whatever it may be? We need to be our spouse's biggest cheerleaders. We need, when they come home and there's something going on, we need to be the ones right there with them that are building them up, that are they know that when I come home, I'm going to be in a safe place, and my spouse is going to encourage me. They're going to speak truth into me. They're going to build me up. Proverbs 19:13b says, "A quarrelsome wife is like the constant dripping of a leaky roof." I don't know about you, but I don't want to be that constant dripping. I don't want my husband to feel that way about me.
And guys, it can work the other way too. I know guys, I've been around guys, I've been guilty of it at times as well, that can be critical. I'm a perfectionist by nature. I'm a very organized, I'm OCD. If you've ever spent much time around me, you probably realize that. And so there were some struggles early in our marriage because I didn't understand why my wife didn't function that way. And so I recognize now the differences where we're at. And so it goes both ways. It's not just about the wife nagging. Sometimes the husband can be a nagger as well. All right, guys, this is the one you've been waiting for, I know, over the last couple of weeks. And so if you have some young kids, you might want to cover their ears. Invest in your marriage. Get naked. All right? All right? No, seriously here. We're talking about this. We're talking about all these other emotional and spiritual connections in marriage. There's also the physical connection in marriage. And that physical connection is vital as well. 1 Corinthians 7:5 says, "Do not deprive each other except perhaps by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer, then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control." You need to figure out how to regularly have physical contact with one another. I know that there might be times that there are medical issues going on. Maybe somebody's sick. Maybe somebody's geographically separated because of business. There are things that happen that keep us separated, but that should not be the norm. That should be the abnormal times. And we need to figure that out. It's very, very important that we figure out how to do that. And I'll just say, as Lindsay mentioned earlier, typically, guys connect on a physical level. Women tend to connect more on an emotional level. And so, guys, we need to be more attentive from an emotional perspective. Women, some of you maybe need to be a little more attentive from a physical perspective and understand that's where your spouse is, that's who your spouse is, that's how we were created. So, we're going to wrap up with just kind of 4 easy questions for you to think about regularly for your marriage that you can ask yourself. First, how am I helping my spouse to grow intellectually? How am I helping my spouse to grow intellectually? Are you encouraging each other to expand your knowledge, to know more? You know, there's a point in my life, and I don't know, I'm still trying to figure out why. My wife said, "You probably need to go back to school. You probably need to learn something." No, she was very supportive when I made the decision. I was serving active duty, working a full job, and made this decision together with my wife that I needed to go to school to begin to prepare to become a pastor. It was actually what God had put on my heart. And so I was working 40 plus hours a week at work. I was taking 12 credit hours a semester for several semesters, and I was working part-time at the church that I was at. And my wife did everything she could to help me, to encourage me, to support me, to pick up the slack for me, taking care of things that I normally took care of in the house. And I look back on those days, and I honestly say, I don't know how we as a couple, I don't know how we did all that. I don't know how I had that much time. And I can just say 2 things. God and my wife, they helped me go through that and to do some things and achieve some things that I couldn't have been able to do otherwise.
The second is, how am I helping my spouse be better emotionally? Again, you know your spouse better than probably anybody else. And so you know when something's going on, whether they've said it or not. You can tell by their mood or the way that they're acting. And so asking your spouse what's going on. I encourage you, though, know your spouse well enough to know when to ask those questions. I know for me, my husband drives an hour each way to and from work. And so the second he walks in the door is not the time for me to pelt him with any questions. I know that he's needs time to decompress and to relax and to breathe before he even jumps into anything else we need to do. And my husband's a little bit quieter, and I know that the best time to talk to him is usually right about the time that I'm about to fall asleep is when he'll say something, and I'm like, "Oh, we're talking, okay, this is fun." But I know that at night when my son is sound asleep and it's dark and it's quiet, that's when my husband's gonna talk. So know when to ask those questions and know enough to ask those questions.
And I would just say 2 things. As we've been talking about this difference between men and women and the physical and the emotional connection. Women tend to like to connect with other women. They have these conversations face to face. That makes guys uncomfortable. Ladies, let me give you a quick hint. You know, I golf with guys. Chad shared this before. As we golf with guys and we're sitting side by side in a golf cart, Guys will share things with me that they would not share with me any other time. They will have this conversation side by side, just like she's talking about. They're laying in bed.
And you don't have to look at anybody
they're
because
just-
it's dark.
And they have these conversations. And so know that about your spouse. But guys, you also need to know that there are times you need to have this face-to-face conversation with your wife. You need to have that emotional connection because it is so powerful. So, thirdly, how am I helping my spouse develop spiritually? And you might be on two totally different planes when it comes to your spirituality. One of you may have been a Christian for years and years and years. There might be a new believer in the mix. There might be somebody who doesn't believe in the mix. But I would challenge you specifically, if you're coming to church together, you need to know what your spouse believes about certain things. You need to have those types of conversations. You need to pray together. You need to be doing things spiritually together to grow in the knowledge. My wife and I do not do devotionals while sitting down together. I'm a morning person. Most mornings I'm awake by 5 o'clock. My wife is not a morning person. My wife is not a night person. My wife is a middle of the day person. And so one of the things that we found that works is this really cool thing called YouVersion. A lot of you probably have that Bible app. You can go on there and you can find a devotional, and if you are friends with your spouse on that app, you can invite them to do that, and you read through the normal devotional material and the scriptures that go along with it, but then it has a place at the bottom where you make comments. And so my wife and I have been doing that for about a year now. We might do one that's 7 days long. We might do one that's 36 days long. We just finished one up today that was 36 days long. But even though I'm reading first thing in the morning and I put my comments in, she sees it a little later in the day. I'll see when she does it, because as soon as she does, I get an email that says she responded. And I can get on and see what her comment was. And sometimes it provokes more conversation that evening when we get together and maybe have a chance for dinner. We can say, hey, what else did you think about that? And so it's just a really cool way to connect in a deeper spiritual level using technology.
And finally, ask, how can I help my spouse be better physically? Are you encouraging your spouse to take care of themselves, to eat well, to work out, to get exercise? Or are you the type that doesn't want them to do that? Maybe you're jealous. They've been at work all day and you don't want them to go to the gym. There's always going to be a balance, but we need to be encouraging our spouse to be better physically. I can tell you, especially with eating, when Tim and I got married, I never have claimed to be a good cook, ever. But I had 3 really good meals when we got married: frozen pizza, tacos, and spaghetti. That was how well I did, or I was really good at going out to eat too. And so we, over the years, both of us have kind of challenged each other. Hey, maybe we should eat, some vegetables once in a while, or things like that. And we are by no means the healthiest people, but we challenge each other through the years, and we kind of listen to each other like, maybe we should cut back on some of the sugar and, the good stuff like the carbs and all that, and maybe we need to eat a little bit better. And so we're progressively together working to be better physically. We here at Refinery want you guys to have strong, healthy marriages. If your marriage is not, those people that you saw standing up today that have been married 30, 40, 50 years, ask them to go to coffee. Take them coffee and just ask questions. Ask how they survived 30 years. Again, every marriage has had highs and lows. Every marriage has had good times and bad times. And so talk about how they dealt with different transitions and seasons of life. Surround yourself with people that are going to lift you up, that are going to encourage you, and just strive to be better spouses. Will you pray with me? God, our desire here is that you will speak into the lives of each and every spouse. God, we know that we all have work to do. We all have things that we can improve on. And God, we pray that we are constantly striving to be more like you. God, that our spouse will see you in us through our words and our actions. God, I pray for those marriages here today that are struggling, that are going through a rough season, a rough time. God, that they will be bold enough to say we need help, that they will know that it is okay to get help, that it is okay to get wise counsel from other people. God, we want marriages that are thriving and not just surviving. God, we love you and we thank you. Amen.